We are recording, Rabbi.
All right, so we're speaking about the highlights of the Shem Elokim. In other words, that not only is Havaya Elokim, but Havaya gains something from being Elokim. We spoke briefly about the idea that of the going in sort of two directions at the same time. That the light requires minimization in order to shine. So they're really not two things. Light his job is to shine, and it can't shine without unless it restricts itself in some way to shine a particular way, or to shine inside the mind of the student. Whatever it is, it has to sort of magbil itself, limit itself, in order to fulfill its own destiny. So really they're one. The revelation and the concealment are one. We said there's a few advantages that come along with the name Elokim. Namely, you get to bring the light into a lower place. If it wasn't for the Shem Havaya, there would be no ability to get the Shem Havaya to shine, let's say, in the lowest world. If it wasn't for the Shem Elokim, there would be no way to get the Shem Havaya to dwell into the lowest world. So the idea is that all of a sudden, the light is able to shine further than it was before, which is the job of light, because of the Shem Elokim. And not only that, but we said once you have a piece of the light, you ultimately you have all the light. Once is there, it doesn't matter how much is you have, right? It's everything. And so we said that this is achievable and understandable to different levels of being at different rates. In other words, the higher you are in the spiritual worlds, you may not only being brought into existence by Havaya, with Elokim, but you're also aware that it's Havaya and Elokim bringing you into existence, which means you're being created and you're aware that you're being created. And yet, even if you're in the higher worlds, your awareness is only at the level of Metzias, which means you don't see that Mamish God, but you see that there is God. And this is evident clearly to all the higher beings. When it comes down to the lower worlds, we could be enlivened by the Shem Havaya, wrapped up in the Shem Elokim, and we're not aware of it. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. The fact that we are in this situation means that ultimately through Avoda, you can also reach an awareness of God. Ultimately, you can unpack, like we said, after 40 years, you can totally understand the meaning of the Rav, and you unpack that little piece of Havaya, that slice of Havaya, and realize that the whole thing is there. So ultimately, the Elokim just gives Havaya a greater extension, a greater shine. And the second advantage of the Shem Elokim upon Havaya, uniting with Havaya, is that you are able to have a saga b'muchash. This is what we left off with yesterday. You can grasp Hashem, as it were, with your senses, because you come into a certain medium, right, where you exist in a gashmius form, or let's say a ruchnius form, but like that existence really materializes it, and it's you, and you're holding it, and you have a visceral experience. You can see it, not just you know about it, but it is you. So when you come to the realization that it is God, so you're in some sense you're having a sensory experience of God, which you cannot do when you're nullified out of existence and God is the only thing that shines. In other words, the Al Shem Elokim, that experience is withheld from us.
So the future is going to be Elokim more?
What?
Or in the future, it's not going to be more Elokim or
Elokim's everywhere, right? I mean, we
we
wouldn't be here. It's already as prominent as it can be. It's so prominent to us, for example, that we go around thinking that all there is Elokim, and we are completely oblivious to Havaya, right? Because most people are walking around without a consciousness of God all the time, in the midst of His service, and purportedly, what are you doing today? I'm serving God. No, I'm going to eat a bagel, whatever, So being in that totally cut off mindset is that Havaya has so contracted itself through the name Elokim that it's gotten to such a low existence that it's not even felt anymore. So hopefully, in the future, it'll be the opposite. We'll bring the Havaya out of the situation.
That's why people are so blind to it, because it's like if you don't pay attention to God, it's like it can hide itself even more.
Yeah.
It's like He's constantly hiding Himself, and it's like our job to unveil Him.
That's right.
Say what I did once.
That's what you
real quick. The signs, beware of dog. Mm-hmm. So I put it on my lawn, and I cut off the D, and I put the G where the D is, and I put it on my lawn.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
Beware of God.
Oh, beware of God. I put
You
beware
say
of God.
be aware of God is better.
What?
Beware is
I cut it too much.
a little
If I cut the sign too much, it was
It's short for be aware.
There you go. Okay, so anyway, we're experiencing Hashem B'muchash. The idea is a sensory. You can grab him. And he says this is like Re'iyas HaMahus. This is where it got a little bit confusing. Re'iyas HaMahus means seeing the thing itself, not just seeing that the thing is. Which we said was not relevant even in the higher worlds. How is it suddenly relevant here? So the idea is that we don't see the Mahus of Hashem, but we see the Mahus of Gashmis. In other words, that something comes into our presence in such a way that it's so obviously real, it's like you can see it. Seeing is believing. So that experience only comes to us because of the name Elohim. If it was just for the same Havaya, there would be no us. And this is what it says, like the difference between, he has to explain this, the difference between Nigla and Nister of the Torah. We started here and we ended here last time. Which is that the revealed parts of the Torah and the concealed parts of the Torah. This is the difference between like Metzias and Mahus. The Nister, who al derech Yedias and Metzias. Knowing the secrets of the Torah is like knowing the Metzias, that it is. Because the thing that we're dealing with, we don't see and we don't feel. We're talking about the spiritual world and the spheros and angels. You don't know those things b'mahus. You know that they are, you don't know what they are. So that's what Chassidus talks about. It deals with the idea of Metzias only. Whereas Nigla, the revealed parts of the Torah, it's knowing the actual what is God. The wisdom of Hashem, as we said yesterday, it materializes in an esrog. Or in the mitzvah of the Daled medium at very least. So the wisdom of God is actually materialized. You don't just know that it is, you know what it is.
What it is Metzius or Mahus?
Mahus. Val Darech zeh, Ali Hester Yodei Es HaInyan Eloki B'muchash Yosef. And as we say that through concealing something, you know the godly matter in a more visceral, sensory way. Just like, for example, the esrog and the lulav versus the spheros. Right? When Hashem the spheros are so high, I can't touch them. When He contracts them and they manifest as physicality, which is really a concealment, it's come low. In other words, the esrog is not the chokhmah batzilus really. It's like it's a mushal of chokhmah batzilus. It's a metaphor for chokhmah batzilus, but Hashem has cloaked it so it can come so late I can actually hold it in my hand. So on one hand, it's a huge descent because it's not chokhmah batzilus. On the other hand, it's the I can hold it in my hand. Whatever aspect of chokhmah batzilus that it is, I can hold it in my hand. So you gain through the concealment an ability to touch the godliness. And he says, "V'kamo b'sari echzeh loka." Just like it says in so many places that from our flesh we can see God. In other words, through understanding the human body, we can understand that it's a metaphor for divinity. So it says, "Kamosu marom einechem uru." Right? The pasuk says, "Lift your eyes upward and see." Mi bara ela, who created these? But he says, "Su marom einechem uru." Lift up your eyes and see. Shad ba'advarim agashmim nira koach ha'ein sof b'muchash u'b'gilui. Meaning to say, lift up your eyes and see is not talking about lift up your eyes to the heavens. To the spiritual heavens. Lift up your eyes and see is talking about the actual physical world. And the idea is, look and see mi bara eila. In other words, you can see who created these. That the physical, in physicality, you can see the power of the Ein Sof b'muchash u'b'gilui. You can see it in actuality. You can see it with your eyes. V'kamo ba'asaga derei nasati levanecha. Shezeu ba b'chinas ria chushis. Kamo sheketuvim b'divra maschil ze hayom. So he basically says elsewhere that this idea of grasping something that it says, "See, I've placed before you the good, right, and the life, or the life and the good." We spoke about this in the previous mimer. Is that you're able to actually look at the object, so to speak, the physical object, and through physicality meditate on godliness and see.
So, Rabbi, are you saying that we look out the window and we see those beautiful hills out there,
right?
And we experience, you know what? That is all part of Hashem. That's the mahus. Are we saying that?
It's the mahus of physicality.
The mahus of physicality.
But the point is that if you look at it, you can see that it's godly. You can see that it's Ein Sof. For example, I guess, I don't know if he doesn't, he really is bringing from a different mimer, but what I gain from here is he says that through physical things you can see the power of the Ein Sof How do you see the power of the Ein Sof in physical things? So there's a few ways. First of all, Ma Rabu Masecha, Ma Gadu Masecha. There's just so much of it. It doesn't end. It goes on forever. Especially with like modern science and so forth. You can see that everything breaks down and breaks down and breaks down. And not only that, but it goes out and out and out. There's the macrocosm and the microcosm, and how many species of things and how many variations of things. It just goes on forever. So even though we're in a physical world, you can make out the fact that there's something Ein Sof going on here. Right? So when you're in a place where there's Ein Sof and no physical world, you're nullified out of existence. So you don't have like a way of actually holding it. Right? Now, there's a downside of it being in the Ein Sof in a physical existence, is that you can overlook the fact that it's Ein Sof. There's a pen in your hand, there's a cup on the chair, I've got to go from here to there, everything is measured distance. You have to think about for a second that there's Ein Sof around here. That really, if I stop for a second and think, the world doesn't come to an end. The number of things and the type of things and the style of things, they go on forever. So you realize there's a koach that's not natural, that's not limited here. So the idea is that looking at that physically is seeing the mahus of that. Whereas if you didn't come into an actual existence, you would not be able to have that experience. You follow what I'm saying? I think the best analogy he gave so already was the idea of this notion of the sphera of Chochmah Batzilus, right? I don't know what it is. And even if I'm in Chochmah Batzilus, I don't really know what it is. It's sort of like, because you are batul when you're there. It's such a godly experience that basically if it's shining, you're not shining. You follow me? So the idea of a contraction is that it hides itself and it leaves room for you. So suddenly you can be there, right? Now once you're there, you can't experience it in its source either, because it's basically you've been cut off by a curtain, and whatever the spiritual world is above you, you don't have availability to. All you have is the tiny, contraction that has a ray of that experience that has come out and made your experience.
So that would be more of a Metzias.
What's a Metzias?
That you're aware that it is.
Yeah, you're aware that it is.
But you don't know the essence.
That's right, except where you are, you do know the essence of. You don't know the essence of godliness, but you know the essence of physicality. You see what I'm saying? Which is a chiddush. Because even that, you didn't have a self to be able to touch the essence of anything. When you were up in the essence itself, you were not negated. So now you come into being, so godliness becomes a metzias, but your reality becomes a mahus. And once you start to consider for a second that your reality is also Ein Sof, so then you're actually having an experience of mahus of the Ein Sof in a certain sense that you didn't have before. You're not having it directly. You're having it, so to speak, at your low level. Like I said, you're holding the esrog, as opposed to understanding, Chochmah Batzilus. And the esrog is a huge contraction from Chochmah Batzilus to get into an esrog. But nonetheless, you can hold an esrog in your hand. You can have such a visceral, real experience with an esrog that you cannot have with Chochmah Batzilus. So that's a benefit that comes from the contraction. Is everyone following this kind of? Mm-hmm. All right. So exactly as we said, just like, for example, through the mashal, an analogy, you can know very well the nimshal, the analog. Same idea. In other words, you couldn't really know the analog as it is. The theory itself stays sort of foreign to you, but when you encloak it with a mashal, you can know the mashal very, very well, and you have like a hold on it because of the contraction. Upinimius yoser hu b'chinas yisuna or the etzem hester gufa shemizgale. And he says, in a deeper way, what is going on here? It's the advantage of the light, the etzem hester gufa shemizgale. That what you're really experiencing, why do you have this sort of advantage suddenly that comes along with the contraction? Why, when you slap Elokim on a vaya, does a vaya get a boost? That it can reveal itself into a further place and be felt in a more concrete way. It's because that aspect of concealment that's playing its role, as you always say, the concealment actually comes from a higher source. The words that he uses is like this: Etzem hahester gufa shemizgale. The essence of concealment itself becomes revealed. What does that mean? So we talk about this also quite often. that when it comes to the essence is essentially unknowable. Right? But when the essence wants to be known, it reveals itself. How does it reveal itself? As light. So light is knowable. So the essence is, so to speak, an attempt to make itself known by shining light. But this is, of course, a little bit not going to work. Why? Because once you see light, you see something knowable, by definition, that's not the essence anymore. So can the essence actually reveal itself? Or is it just stuck revealing itself in a way of light? And the answer is it can reveal itself, but you might not want it, because it comes out as darkness. So when you see darkness, what you're really seeing is the essence revealing itself. It's much higher than light. And so the same thing applies here. Why, when Havaya gets encloaked in Elohim, suddenly do we see all these advantages in the Shem Havaya? It's because the cloaking of Elohim itself comes from the essence. It's a revelation of the essence itself. Darkness is higher than light. And therefore when you attach darkness to the light, you get something higher than the light alone can give you. The essence of darkness itself becomes revealed. As it's known that concealment comes from a higher source than revelation. Simple, there it is. Like for example, a mashal and a nimshal. It's very interesting actually. You would think the mashal, an analogy, is on a very much lower level than the analog. Because I'm this wise person that I understand something, and the only way I can deliver it to you is by talking about apples and oranges. I have to put it into a story, I have to put it into a little metaphor. So obviously the metaphor is a huge contraction, but the reality is that in order for me to get it down to you, and find the right letters to encase my idea into a foreign substance, and find some other entity that's going to now perfectly hold this idea, that comes from a place that's higher than the idea itself. Something from above the idea has to be able to push that idea down and make it be held in a kli. And therefore the mashal itself has a higher source than the actual nimshal. It's a crazy thing. I think it's a crazy thing.
Very crazy.
Shalom. You guys following this? You following along? Okay. Shamashal b'shor shalamayla nimshal. The mashal, as we know, in its source is higher than the nimshal. Kenoda, as it's known. So in other words, what we have is darkness, and we're told the source of darkness is higher than light, but so all it looks like is darkness. It's really like holding me back from being in the higher world. It's keeping me in the state of mashal. How do I get the fruits out of the darkness and reveal its source? This is the avoda. It's called the avoda of removing darkness. Right? Our whole avoda is basically to try and strip away the darkness. Like we said, sit and think for a while. Look up in the sky and see. In other words, reflect, meditate that really what looks like a bunch of finite, limited things is an infinite world. You have to spend your time being busy undoing the proposed concealment.
But in your definition, that means you're trying to remove the essence. If the darkness is the essence.
No, you're not trying to remove the darkness in the sense that you're trying to make it completely go away. You're trying to make the negative parts of it go away. Sweeten the gevuras. Meaning to say that you don't want to. Yeah, it could be that the essence would go away, right? If you go back to the light and you go out of your kli, you actually lost. Because going out of the light, you go back to the Shem Havaya, you lost the essence, because the Shem Havaya is just a ray of light, really. So attaching yourself to the fact that you're in a kli, which on one hand blocks the Shem Havaya, you don't want it to go away. That's why Hashem gave the Torah to neshamas in bodies. Because that's where the essence specifically can be revealed, because there is the goof there. But what? You have to make us the goof, instead of concealing the light, you show that it itself is a power of godliness. Mizgala koach hanelam sheyesh bazeh. In other words, what is the words for that? You reveal the hidden power that it has in it. As he says elsewhere at length, v'zehu inyan hamtakas ha'gevuras. So what's it called? It's called sweetening the gevuras. Not making them go away, but sweetening them. Shimtakim v'naisim chasadim. Meaning what? You make them themselves chasadim. You make them so they're no longer blocking light, but they themselves are revealing light. In other words, you make it clear that Havaya hu Elohim. Elohim itself is light. It's not even just stam light. It's actually an additional wondrous aspect of light that you didn't even know the light contained.
When we say Havaya, really again, surely it should be Elohim who Havaya.
We said it's basically, we could say both. Is there one?
But that's what we're trying to. I mean, the whole Indian is to say that actually the Elohim that's Havaya, that's the revelation. It's Elohim that's Havaya, and yet the phrase is all about Havaya.
I think because it's what it's saying is that it's like Havaya Shehu Elohim. It's Havaya that's really Elohim. It's not something else. There is no concealment. That's what we're saying, right? If you say Elohim is really Havaya, you're saying the concealment is really light. You're saying Havaya Elohim to begin with. It's Havaya that appears as though it's concealing itself from you. Because we said, remember the intellect itself has the ability to shine and to limit itself. It's like it has these two opposite powers. They're not really two things at the end of the day. They're just one expression of God, which is ultimately light. It's just that for the light to shine itself in full, it needs to contract itself. So the contraction is not a real thing. Havaya, it's Havaya that's Elohim. I hear what you're saying. I mean, you can go back and forth on that one. What does it mean to sweeten the Gevuras? It's the idea of the unification of Havaya and Elohim. So it's all of a sudden he says, okay, Havaya is Zah and Elohim is Malchus. Because we said earlier that this is the beginnings of Chesed and Gevura. Remember we spoke about you have light and darkness, which is basically Chesed and Gevura, and that becomes night and day, right? Zah and Malchus. So we're dealing with this idea of night and day, Chesed and Gevura, which really Havaya and Elohim. Shagavurus va'helem de beginis Malchus.
She's speaking in Yichud in Chesed and Gevura or Zah Malchus?
Both.
Are they both Zah and Malchus are
In other
representative
words,
of light and dark?
what's that?
They're representative of light and dark, Zah and Malchus.
Light and dark. Zah and Malchus. In other words, like we said earlier, that all of Zah is primarily the Indian of Chasadim. All of Malchus is primarily the Indian of Gevurus. Remember we spoke about that at length? How Malchus is built from the Gevura, everything. It's like the Gevura of every Sphira expressed itself as Malchus. So uniting Chesed and Gevura is the same thing. It's also uniting all the expressions of Chesed, all the expressions of Gevura. It's the ultimate fusion of the two opposites.
So
Yeah.
Just to make it concrete, so we had this this terrible thing that happened with the killings in America. Okay, and so how would you? That's
You have
like
to say
Gevura.
you have to say the date because every other day is happening.
I know. So how do you sweeten that? I mean, you say that. You say it's God's will. You say that there's some I don't know. What do you do with that?
You don't comfort the person when his dead is lying before him. So, but it's not like a simple answer how to deal with death all of a sudden. But it becomes, I think, clear when you start to see what the Gevuras are in their source. And so long as we're looking at out of its source and we're feeling the pain of our existence, and so we're not seeing that everything is God, because if we wouldn't see it as darkness. Look at Nachamish Gamzu, right? He's like the ultimate. First of all, he's our local tzaddik, but he's also the ultimate example of this. When the things happened that were bad, he didn't, like Rabbi Akiva, his students, say, Koma da'avid Rahman latava abid. Everything that Hashem does, he does for the good. Which means that even though Rabbi Akiva experienced it as bad, but he right away was like on such a level, he was like, everything Hashem does is for the good. It can't be bad. Ultimately, it looks bad, but Hashem did it for the good. Rabbi Nachamish Gamzu, he said, Gamzu latova. As soon as his jewels were stolen, he didn't reflect and say, "Oi, what did Hashem do to me?" He said, "Baruch Hashem, amazing! Like, not only is this not bad, this is fantastic." And he was right, because if he would have taken regular jewels to the king, you know the story.
Yes.
Then there's no telling that the king would have accepted his jewels. But taking magic dirt to the king was mamash good. It was better than the other scenario. Now, how did he get to see such a thing? Because he was literally seeing things as they are in their actual source. In other words, he was seeing that there is no concealment. and that the only reason that we see concealment is because Hashem is actually trying to reveal something more. Like the teacher who holds back his full knowledge in order so that the student can understand it, because he would give too much, he wouldn't perceive what he's saying. But to the teacher himself, he's not holding back his knowledge. It's still full revelation. It's total godliness he's giving over. It's the totality of godliness that he's giving over. The only reason he's not holding a little bit of it back is so that the godliness can show up and be seen on a lower level. Nachmish Gamzu was seeing like the teacher sees. He did not see the concealment. Right? So which means he basically didn't feel himself. He was like where the Rav is holding. Like he was aware, just like Hashem is aware, that what looks like is a holding back of light is actually a revelation of divinity. We who are on this other side of the curtain are not experiencing that. The first thing we feel is self and pain and anger and questioning. And why? Because our gevuras are not sweetened. Where Hashem is, all there is goodness and light. Ein ra yorah milamayla. No bad comes from above. The bad comes from below, from our perspective. But when he sends it out, it is not in fact bad. It is good. It is light. It's just because it's being held back so we can perceive the light in our level. It looks like it's a big concealment. It looks like there's some curtain being thrown in front of our eyes and we're not seeing God. And we basically can't get out of there. But meditating deeply enough on this concept supposedly puts you in a space where you're approaching Nachamish Gamzu. Not really big. I mean, it's not so simple.
It's not so simple.
Not so simple. But it at least we can hopefully try and be like Rabbi Akiva, where we say, okay, I'm not like at such a level where I just automatically see things in their source and all is good. But at least I know that that's true to the point that it can mamish help me through everything in life, because I know that it is good. And so it's like I'm not. How long am I going to fall for? How long am I going to fall for it? That this is kiviyachol, something which is trying to keep me from God and bring me down. It's all it is God. So this is the idea of basically being strengthened and really truly encouraged when negative things happen. That, at least for sure, is within our capability. The more we think about the reality as truth, and when you see it, it's like sort of philosophical, essential truth. That's how it is. Oh, that's not how I experience it. Okay, that's a problem with me, not the problem with God. In other words, it's not really bad, and I know that it's not really bad. It's just that I don't feel that it's not really bad. But if I think long enough about how much I know that it's not really bad, ultimately that will affect my feelings as well.
So the sweetening would be that there's an ultimate chesed, even though I can't see it.
Not only that, according to Rabbi Akiva, there's an ultimate chesed. According to Rabbi Nachamish Gamzu, it itself is chesed. It's mamish the best thing that could have happened. It's not a negative that's going to bring you to a better. There's nothing better than that could happen than this. I brought magic dirt to the king instead of gold and silver. But that's
still to say Gamzu L'Teva.
What's that?
You still have to say Gamzu L'Teva. If it really actually wasn't bad at all, then you wouldn't even have to.
No, but no. On the contrary.
If he didn't see bad, then what would he say Gamzu L'Teva? I just took a sip of water. I say Gamzu L'Teva. No, there's no bad in that. Obviously, he sees the bad.
No.
He has to translate it to good and say Gamzu L'Teva.
That's a good point.
No.
Yes.
No, he's not. No, it's not that he sees the bad. He sees a change. He said God do the Tov on many things. In other words,
he saw a change.
He saw that in other words, you take a turn, you take a right turn, you take a left turn. It's good. Why does it have to see bad first? Why is that a necessity?
He'd be saying Gamzu L'Teva the entire day.
Basically.
Like non-stop, because everything.
Okay. For the good, it's for the good.
Yeah, basically.
For the bad, it's for the good. For the good, it's good.
Rabbi Akiva.
You could say, what is the gam? Is that this is very good. In other words, this is something spectacular. Before I was just happy. Gam Zulatov is
this is Alma Discassia. This is way higher.
Right. Because that's clear. That's definitely the Rebbe's shita on this. He has a sikh about it. He says that Bichlal, Rabbi Akiva said the phrase in Aramaic. We just spoke about this difference between Aramaic and Hebrew on Shabbos. That Kol Ma Da'avi Rachman L'Tava Avid is dafkin Aramaic, because he was experiencing God in translation. He wasn't seeing the good itself. He was seeing the good as it wrapped himself up in something else, but he was able to see through it. But the fact that he says Gamzu L'Tov in Hebrew means that he was seeing clear as day. There was no concealment whatsoever on it.
When Rabbi Akiva was getting burned alive, though, it's probably the best example of that because that's the lowest you can possibly get to the point where like insanity, and yet he was trying to keep himself alive and experiencing it. So that's even, you would say it's more so than, like it wasn't that bad to see dirt, have an anxiety attack, but getting burned alive is a little bit more complex.
Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu had a similar horrible fate.
Oh yeah?
All of his arms and legs were cut off.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and he was, go ahead.
He was covered in these like terrible boils, and his whole body was in tremendous pain. He was
Did
lying
someone
on his
do that to
death-
him?
They had to put his bed, the posts of his bed in pails of water, so the the insects couldn't crawl up and get in. He was just like mamish like that.
Oh, he was dying.
He did it to
from a
himself.
disease.
He did it to himself, because there was one point when someone asked him for. He said. Someone said.
He had some
Came to
food.
abuse-
He wanted. Someone asked him for food.
And he said when he gets off his donkey,
He said, wait till I.
And in the meantime, the guy died. So he says, these hands that didn't give you fast enough should be cut off, and these eyes blinded,
Whoa.
And he basically just he took upon himself all these evils. But that's the difference. He took upon himself. In other words, that's why he's different than Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva also was going for the same thing. He wanted to show that, like, dark night, it's all the same. But by Rabbi Akiva, he was like taken and burned. Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu was like, this is a very Gamzu Latova.
Wow.
You know what I'm
Rabbi
saying?
That's the
Akiva
first
felt
time I
like
heard
really
this.
close to Rabbi Akiva.
What's that?
So like if you have a friend, that's the person that you can specifically rag on. But if someone's like not close to you, you have to like give them compliments only.
Yeah.
So the Rebbe knows my morm. He says Rabbi Akiva, his Mesiras Nefesh was in the way of bad, and his this was. So the Rebbe keeps on like going on Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah.
Which is all is like my morm. For some reason, he's like the scapegoat.
Yeah.
Was he around after Rabbi Akiva?
No, he was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. That's the whole
Oh,
point.
this guy was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah, Rabbi Nachum Ish Gamzu. He's buried in Tzfat.
Oh yeah.
Let's go.
Hashem doesn't want us to do that because we're not doing it the way, what he's doing. In other words, we're experiencing pain. Only tzaddikim who are really like recognizing that it's their father's admonition, and it's like a child who's a tzaddik, the son of a rebbe, and his father's going to chastise him. He's going to run towards that because he knows that that's better than when his father stam loves him. It's like his father's giving him like an extra measure of attention.
Chastising himself.
But he's not, because he's not in a state of really self. Like he's completely bottled to the Eibishter. The Eibishter's will is his will. So the fact that something happened, which the guy died on him, that itself is Hashem's chastising him. So his accepting these punishments, they're not like he really gave himself the punishments, in the sense like he took upon evils of the world in his own goof. Like it's like a tzaddik sort of takes like the sin of the generation away, because he did it willingly, like a son who's trying to take on the admonition of his father, because a real true tzaddik son, that's what he lives for,
Why wasn't it good that the guy died?
Also good. But I guess he felt like in his own service he could have served more. There was a lack in his service. It was good because it brought him this whole other level of service.
But if it's wrong to bring a tattoo or a mark on your body, Chomer, isn't it more wrong to?
He didn't cut off his own arms.
Oh,
he
he did not.
prayed that these eyes that saw it should be blinded, and that these arms should be cut
prayed.
off. Yeah,
And
he
then it
prayed
happened.
to Hashem, and it happened. Yeah, he didn't cut off his own arms. No, chas v'shalom, you can't do that. That's what you meant? Oh, sorry about that.
You allowed to pray for your arms to be cut off.
Also, we know. But I'm saying there's a whole in brachas over there that tzaddikim, they pray for yisurim and so forth. It's something that's not shy to an average man. Obviously, we want to not
Just pray
have
for
yisurim.
Parnas, so don't get too crazy on us.
Yeah.
Basic.
So going on, we want to make the yichud of Havaya and Elokim, and this is the yichud of Chesed and Gevurah, and this is the idea that the Gevuras should be sweetened. Right? Gevuras v'helim de bechinas Malchus. These Gevuras and concealment, which is what Malchus is, right? Malchus is, we said, Malchus is built by removing all the leg. Kavod Malchusecha Yomeru, Ugvrasecha Yidaberu. Kavod Malchusecha Yomeru is the glory of your Malchus from the Gevuras are made, right? Ugvrasecha Yidaberu. Your Gevura will speak and it will create your Malchus, which means how is Malchus made? like we said regarding like the water urn. You remove all the water and you reveal the sediment and the calcium inside. So you can only see that if you remove the chasadim. So it's also this is the idea of the creation of Malchus from the Gevuros, that the Helam, the Kli of Malchus is revealed by the removal of the light. This is the Shem Elokim. But that's the separation of them. That you see that they're mamish two opposite things. Here's light and here's vessel, and they're now separate from each other. All of that is only in order to come back and bring them, so that you unite them and you bring the Giloy of Havaya into the vessels, and you make it clear that the vessels are not something other than the light. In order to do that, you have to separate them first. And that's what we talked, and we're going to talk now again about the removal of Adam from Chava. It was the Havdalah, which the whole Ma'amar is sort of coming back to piece. You know, the separation of light from darkness that we spoke about at such great length. It's the removal of light and darkness, Chesed and Gevurah, in order to get the Gevuras to be by themselves, so that they could come face to face with the light again, and become sweetened and realize that they too all they are is light.
Versus if they were always with light, then they just would have always been nullified.
They would have been overlooked continuously, like Batul Metzias, but should they come out of Metzias, they would have looked like something that was opposite. In other words, it's almost like the enemy within. You know, we talked about it in yesterday's class also. You might have some really negative midos. You might really have some, like I'm dealing right now with one family that they're having they have like a family feud going on. Chas v'shalom lo aleinu, shalom neda. It's really sad. But the idea is that it's been there for a long time. You know, family feud doesn't start today. It started 100 years ago. And the thing is that they made it as though everything was fine for 100 years. And all of a sudden, like, it's horrible. It's mamish, and it's like the tragedies that you just described. How is that good? You know what I'm saying? How is that good? But the idea is that it was anyway not good. It was sitting inside of there, festering for 100 years, not good, right? And the thing is that you couldn't see it. So the not goodness of it was not even showing itself. Once it comes out and reveals itself as not good, then all of a sudden, it's separated from itself from the light. The light can now have a look at it and show how it really is good. In other words, it can turn it around and realize that it came in order to, let's say, bring the family even closer together, to reach a level of heights that they could not have reached before. So that ability to reach such great levels of heights, which was actually latent in the light, and it was actually a really good thing, but it kept it sort of under wraps because the initial experience that would have happened if it came out was a negative thing. So the tendency is to keep the negative things swallowed up, to not make the Havdalah, because you want to sort of preserve your happy moment. But really, after making the Havdalah and then creating this sweetening, you realize that the Havdalah was greater than the light itself, that the separation caused an even higher level of Aliyah. So you see, going back to what I was saying before, this you can see is true. It makes perfect sense, in theory. Then all of a sudden, you're dealing with the victims of the crash. So it's like you fall out of the theory and you go into just feeling sad. But if you have this realization of what bad really is, it's not just, you're not fooling yourself. And you're not just like a mother coming over and saying, don't worry son, it'll be all right, which really doesn't comfort anybody because you're just like, it's not all right. But if you have this deep understanding philosophically of what the thing really is, it has a completely different effect on how you respond and how you deal with life, because you know that it's good. Back to your point. Okay, so he's saying that the Shem Havaya fuses with the Shem Elokim. V'naisim gam kim b'chines or v'gilui. It too becomes revelation and light. It's not just Kli anymore. It's actually a revelation of a new dimension of Hashem. Kli looked like it hides something. But you realize that the Kli itself is just another power that God had, which is not light, which is Kli, which is even greater. Not only is it light, but it's the highest form of light. When you turn darkness into light, it's not just regular light. It's the advantage of light that comes from being made out of darkness. And let me explain that for a second. What's the advantage of light that comes out of being made out of darkness? It's very deep. The light, which here, Yisra or Mina Choshech. Let's go look at it. It's called advantage of light from darkness. So the simple reading of that is that light is better than darkness. You can read that statement to just mean there's an advantage of light over darkness. Light is good, darkness bad. Then you can read it to mean there's an advantage of light that comes from darkness. In other words, because of a bad thing that happened, I feel like I've been strengthened even more than if the bad thing didn't happen. That's stage 2. But then there's the real meaning. There's the advantage of light that comes from the darkness itself, not from the effect of the darkness. But when the darkness turns to light, that is the highest advantage of light you can have. Why? Because that's a light which is now impervious to darkness. All the other lights, even though it's better than darkness, or it gets increased from darkness, it's still affected by darkness. It still feels darkness. There's still a polarity there. But a light which comes from darkness, which means the darkness itself becomes transformed to light, it's the greatest light there is because nothing can darken it anymore. It knows from darkness. It's not fooled by darkness. It turned darkness into light. Now it's impervious. Now it's nitzchi. It's eternal good. So you need darkness to find eternal good. Light itself cannot give you eternal good. It only ever gives you a relative good based on how much darkness is able to oppose it. But light which comes from darkness itself, it's eternally good.
Why?
Because it cannot be challenged anymore. It turns darkness into light. Like Nachum Gamzu. There's nothing bad that can happen to it. It's impervious. So you can only get that from darkness. From a theoretical bad thing being transformed.
What about just piling on more and more and more light?
You know what you get? You get 100-year family feud. It doesn't mean the darkness went away. It just means you're piling tons of light on it and making it so that it's not there. It's like Polish or Chassidus. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but this is the Shita. Stay next to the tzaddik. Tzaddik be'emunasu yichaya. The tzaddik will enliven you with his emunah. As long as you stay close to him, all your bad characteristics will never surface. Because he's just going to take care of you and pull you out of Gehenna. You don't have to worry about it. Basically, don't let the light surface. Don't make the Havdalah. Comes the Rebbe and he says, you know the famous story, the guy's in Gehenna, pulls out a dollar, he goes to the Rebbe, how did I wind up here? He pulls out a dollar, he says, good luck on your shlichus. And as the Rebbe sends you to Gehenna, he's like, and that's for your own good. Because you wanna separate from the light so you can turn darkness into light and do something even for the Rebbe. Right? You can even give something the Rebbe doesn't have, because you're the one in the darkness. And therefore, when you turn darkness into light, you create the nitzchi. The Rebbe is just there to help you. You become the star of the show. Whoa.
It sounds like that's, from our perspective, that's good. From the Etzem, it doesn't work.
What do you mean?
Because it's all light. Because we can turn darkness into light. You don't need to do that. We need to do it.
Yes, 100%. But when we do that, what we're ushering forth is the essence. In other words, we're making a kli for the essence. Where all the realms of light, they cannot make a kli for the essence. You're right, it's not a chiddush. It's not like the essence isn't already there. But the crazy thing is that the essence can reveal itself only here, and it can't reveal itself over there. It's amazing. It's a big thing, though, right? We're not creating the essence, chas v'chalila, but we're making it be there. One last line. So he says, the Adra b'chinas or naila b'yosa. This light is not only sweetened, but it's the highest of all lights. V'kamo keinu inyan v'ashevosa levavecha. As we said, v'yadaita hayom. Know the inyan of hayom. What is hayom? Yom is night and day. You don't make a yom achas, right? V'yer v'yibokir yom echad. It's the inyan of night and day as one. And then v'ashevosa levavecha. This whole pasuk is basically saying the same thing over and over again. V'yadaita hayom. That's the inyan of making night and day into one. V'ashevos levavecha, place it on your heart. Your heart, it says levavecha, base levavos, with 2 vases. So it's saying place it on your hearts, plural, because they really have to make the hearts also, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. Realize that is one. This is deep. Which means your ultimate service is with your Yetzer Hara, basically. Turning your Yetzer Hara into good is way better than not having one in the first place. Because it can create ultimate good. Him nefesh elokis v'nefesh bahamis, your animal soul and your godly soul. That's what it means. Place it on your heart. Realize the distinction of night and day. That is one thing. Then realize how that applies to your godly soul and your animal soul. And what are you supposed to know and place in your heart? Havayahu Elokim. That it's all a unification of Havaya and Elokim. The leiv chacham liyamino. It says the heart of the wise man is on his right. That's the nefesh elokis, which is b'chalal hayamini, which is on the right ventricle. Hamali ruach chayim, which is filled with life. The nefesh ba'am is b'chalal smali. Hamali dam, and the nefesh Bahamis seats itself in the left ventricle of the heart, which is filled with blood. That's also chesed and gevura. So there's also two things that have to be united by going through a separation and a sweetening. Not only the chesed and gevura, the source of the godly soul comes from Havaya, and the source of the animal soul comes from Elokim. So it's also a yichud of Shem Elokim and Havaya. But tzrichos gam ken yichud the nefesh Bahamis v'nefesh Elokim. So you have to unify these two things. It's a crazy thing. How can you unify bitter enemies like this? They look like opposites. How can they become unified? How can you show me that my nefesh Bahamis is my nefesh Elokis? Havayu Elokim. Shagavuras the nefesh Bahamis yuchlu b'nefesh Elokis. That the gavuras, the contraction, the concealment, the separation of the nefesh Bahamis would become included inside the nefesh Elokis. Shagam nefesh Bahamis. It should come to the same level of bittul and the same level of avas Hashem as the godly soul, and even more so. We'll get to it tomorrow. Yeah.
That is it's a good thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's coming from